the young adults that we work with. And so we offer a myriad of services. We offer the PAL Life Skills Training program for young adults that are still in foster care. We have an aftercare case management program for those that transition out. We have a workforce program for young adults who are looking for work, and also an education program to help them engage in their education and finish high school or go on to college. And then we have this myriad of housing programs, which includes transitional housing, rapid rehousing, short-term rental assistance, and permanent supportive housing. And so I think that's really what we're here to talk about today. We've invited Ed Eason, who's our Assistant Vice President of Health and Housing, and so he really is CitySquare's liaison to the local continuum of care, and really helps to drive forward some housing initiatives on a broader scale. CitySquare at large is the largest housing provider of housing services to the chronically homeless, and so the youth programming and housing that we have is also a significant program in our continuum. And so Ed can answer a lot of questions from that space. And then Carla Cleeton is our assistant director here at TRAC, and so she oversees all of our clinical operations. But she also really was our housing program manager and has worked her way up through the system to take on that role. And so she really was instrumental in building community partnerships and collaborations with the other youth providers to best serve our youth, because even though we have a large number of beds in our housing program, it's still not enough to meet the need of the entire community. So we have to work with the community providers. And so Carla's a great collaborator and can talk about how we've done that. And she also can talk through some of the ways that we restructured our program from a traditional transitional housing program to one that's more housing first and harm reduction focused. And so hopefully you guys have some questions for us, and hopefully we'll be able to help navigate that. So we look forward to where this discussion goes.
Okay, thank you very much, Madeline. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start the Q&A session in this program. And so we'll open it up to the group. If you have any questions about CitySquare, if you could please type or click *6 in your phone. That will bring up a little cue for me to know that you have a question to ask, and then we can unmute you and you can ask your question out of the folks from CitySquare. As people are thinking about that, I know that I have a couple of questions that we can use just to get started. The first one that I wanted to ask is regarding the community resource partnerships that you've had. What did TRAC do, or CitySquare do, to build those partnerships? So in other words, what did you do and what advice would you give to a program to build those relationships and to get those partnerships really started and off the ground?
Okay, sorry, I couldn't find the microphone. I think when you talk about resource partnerships, the important thing to know is that most of our housing programs are funded by HUD. And so HUD is a large partner of ours in doing this programming. I know other youth programs may go through RHY funding, but ours is all through HUD, and so that is an important distinction as to how and why we run our programs the way we do, because they have different deliverables. But in terms of resource partners, because we started as a great collaboration in 2000 of the community, we have this natural inclination to believe in collaboration and partnerships, and so we know that we can't do it alone. And so some of our big partners in housing are the other youth providers. So in Dallas, there's maybe 8 different providers that specifically focus on homeless youth, and so we partner with them and are able to do different referrals. One of the things that we just recently started this year is meeting monthly to go over a list of who's the homeless youth in our community and what's the program that best suits their needs, to really kind of help focus that. In terms of foster youth, we also, a great partner of ours is Child Protective Services, of course, and they have a unit called the PAL unit, and so those staff members focus on this population between 14 and 21, and so we partner with them. And then we also need partnerships with a lot of landlords. So we do a lot of landlord negotiation here. Most of our housing is scattered site, so we don't own a house or a dorm-like setting. We operate more scattered site, and so that takes a lot of integration with landlords and things like that. So I have Carla joining me in my office here, so she might have some more to add in a minute, but I'm not sure that that fully answered your question in terms of resource partnerships. We also have to work with our local food pantry and food banks. We have lots of private donors, so we have someone who heard that our young people were moving into their own apartments. So for our scattered or temporary rental assistance programs, those young adults are in their own apartments. And so we're not providing the furniture for them. And so we had a community partner who said, hey, I want to do something about this. So we helped her create a donation-based program called My Own Bed, so that community members can actually donate beds, brand new ones, not used mattresses, to our youth as they move into their own apartments. So we rely heavily on the community to step into that gap of what a lot of our government funding won't pay for. So Lynn, I can't hear you.
Yeah, so that's the danger of muting back and forth, is forgetting to unmute. So sorry about that. So it looks like we do have another question here. So I'm going to select that person. This is new software for us. So I'm going to go ahead and click. I don't know that it's a 734 area code, so you're coming up next here. All right, so whoever was at the 734 area code, you should be able to ask your question now. Okay, I'm not hearing the person. I don't know if you're on mute still, so you might want to check to see if your little microphone is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. We can. If you could let us know who you are and what organization you're with, and then ask your question. Thank you.
Sorry about that. This is Jenny Harmon, and I'm with Our House here in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Michigan. I have two questions. One, you mentioned that HUD is your largest partner/funder. And so I wonder if your programs were ones that you submitted through your continuum of care, and are you that continuum, or do you have multiple partners? And then I have a follow-up question.
Okay, Madeline, if you could dial *6, that's going to how I am able to unmute you. Okay. So, all right, you should be able to talk now.
Okay, so here I am. Yes, so since we are a HUD-funded entity, we do have to go through our continuum of care. And so one of the things that I failed to mention earlier is we are the transition center for all of what the Department of Family and Protective Services here in Texas calls Region 3. So we provide services to the 19 counties of North Texas, including the two large ones that most of you would know about, Dallas and Tarrant, which is Dallas, the city of Dallas, and the city of Fort Worth. And so we do have to go through the continuum of care, and we do have to apply and compete against all the other community providers, including those that provide services to HIV-specific populations, families, seniors, the chronically homeless. And so if you were here at the very beginning, I did explain that CitySquare is the largest provider of housing services to the chronically homeless. So my youth applications even compete internally against other CitySquare programs because that's how continuums of care work. And then we have been ranked in Tier 1 funding because our continuum here in Dallas is called the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance. And so they believe that our youth housing programs are important. But we have been in Tier 2 before and been fearful that we were going to lose that funding. But we did end up receiving that award through HUD because the funding was able to last through that Tier 2. And then this year, so in the fall of 2018, we launched our first HUD-funded housing project in the Tarrant County continuum, which is
the hybrid.
The Tarrant County homeless. It's a new application where we had to compete against other programs that we haven't typically competed against and gotten to know. And so we started attending continuum meetings and getting to know the continuum people and just kind of finding out more about that continuum and looking at what programs they do have. And so the thing that we knew was that there were 0 youth housing programs in Tarrant County. And so we knew that they desperately needed one. And so there was the opportunity to apply for a new hybrid for youth called a transitional housing, rapid rehousing hybrid. And so we took that opportunity to apply for a small project in that continuum and were able to win that application process. Our ranking was high in Tier 1. And so we're excited about that, but it's only been going on now for 4 months. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue that. And then I don't know what your follow-up question is, though, Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny, you'll have to type *6 in again so that I can unmute you, please, and then you can ask your question. So I'm learning about this software. Only one person can talk at a time, and if you want to speak, you have to type in *6. So, all right, I just clicked your little button, so you should be able to talk now, Jenny.
Thank you. So my follow-up question, Madeline, is what secrets can you share to encourage those organizations or individuals who do similar things as you or who might be your competitors to willingly collaborate with you?
Madeline, if you could put *6 in, and I'll unmute you. All right, you should be good to go.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to let Carla answer that. She's my assistant director here.
Oh, so some of the secrets that we can share is the open communication with different youth providers. What I've discovered is that we have plenty of homeless youth, and we needed to kind of make sure our housing resources were protected because we did have a large number of homeless youth. And so we might take some of the harder to serve youth, the youth that have some substance abuse issues, and our partner may take one of our girls, or, well, that's the biggest provider is for females, and switch out that way. So we kind of prioritize the populations that we were going to serve. Does that help?
Yeah, so I would say one of the secrets was just really aligning ourselves with our community of providers and knowing who does what and defining that really well as a collaborative effort to make sure that no youth falls through the cracks. And so instead of us going after the same homeless youth, we really define and hone our programming for a specific youth population. So here in Dallas, there's a number of transitional housing programs for young ladies. And so we tend to serve a lot of young men or those young ladies that fail their entry requirements. And so we have 0 entry requirements for our housing program because we are designed to serve the most acute.
Right.
And so, so for that reason, if we have a high-performing young lady who comes in to us and asks for assistance, we might refer them to a community partner in order to free up a bed space for a young person that would have more trouble engaging in a different housing program. And so because we're collaborative with the youth that we share, other programs are the same. Now that was a long road to hoe in our community.
Sure.
So we've done housing since 2005. So that took a while to build a niche and to build the support and collaboration of our community. On a larger scale, when you talk about HUD funding, you're not just competing with youth providers, you're also competing with these other special populations. And so it's just making sure that we have a seat at the table at the continuum and in all of those discussions. And so we've been lucky that we've had enough staff that we could divide and conquer that. And with the addition of Ed, who oversees all the housing strategy for all of CitySquare, we're able to make sure that the continuum understands why youth housing is so important and why that should be held to a high esteem. So maybe this impacted a lot of your communities as well a few years ago when HUD decided that transitional housing wasn't the way to go, and lots of continuums just cut them all, which is what happened in Tarrant County here. And so that's how they ended up with 0 youth housing programs, because most youth thrive in a transitional housing program. And so here in Dallas, that didn't happen. Our transitional housing programs were seen as important for youth and for domestic violence victims. And so it's that education at a community level of why each different type of housing structure is important for that particular population, and proving up the outcomes at the end, that you are moving young adults to permanency, that you are moving young adults to income, that you are meeting the deliverables that a continuum at large is graded on. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here. It's not going to be verbal, but through the chat box. Sherry from our house in Michigan is asking Madeline if you could speak to your dismissal process in the event someone is not succeeding in your housing programs. If you could speak to that, please. Let me see. I might need to unmute you. Are you still unmuted?
I muted myself and I just navigated over there. So hopefully you guys can hear us.
Yes.
So it depends on what you're talking about. So for our short-term rental assistance, those young people still can get case management along the way, and there's no dismissal. They opt in and out as they go, and so they prove up a need for their short-term rental assistance. So as long as they're proving up need, we're helping them. In terms of our transitional housing program, that is a little trickier, and because we are HUD funded and we have moved into this new HUD blend of transitional housing, rapid rehousing, we are a housing first project, which means that we cannot screen at entry. We take the young person that is in front of us that has been on the streets the longest.
That's been through the coordinated entry.
Yeah, so we participate in the coordinated entry system, and then once they're in that program, because it is shared housing, so our transitional housing is shared, there are some safety issues, and so we have, and I don't know that I have that form ready where I could show it to you, but we do have a transitional housing roadmap that we go over with the young person about, hey, this is what it means to be a good neighbor and a good tenant at the onset, and then the entire time, we are talking to them about their housing plan, about getting together, and so we do it's not really, it's eviction prevention forms is what we call it, and so they we do write them up for things. So if their apartment is too dirty, if they are being rude to their neighbor, we just had a young man have a whole barbecue because we're in Texas, and so the weather's sometimes nice on the weekend. So they had a big barbecue on their patio, which is a huge safety issue for the apartment complex. And so, of course, he had to have an eviction prevention notice about that. And so we have in our policies that if they get 3 of those, that they'll have a meeting with our housing program manager to go over, is this really working for them? And if there is a 4th event that happens, then we do ask them to leave, but we still work with them to move them to a different housing solution. Do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think that you covered it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in our permanent supportive housing program, if they get evicted, then we're going to try and find them another apartment. So we don't dismiss them at that time either. We keep them on our books, and then we move them to a different apartment complex. However, if they get 5 evictions and another apartment complex won't lease to them, then our hands are tied, and that is the only time we would dismiss them and exit them from the program, is if we simply cannot find an apartment in our community. But then they would still be able to come and work with our youth outreach worker and able to use our resource center until we could figure out a different way to house them through another provider who maybe has because we use scattered site, we have to rely on landlords, but another housing provider, they might own an apartment building, and so then they would have to work their way up their housing list.
Okay, thank you. All right, again, a reminder, if you have any questions, you could just put in *6, and that'll put up a little bubble for me that tells me that you have a question, and we can unmute you. But you could also send it through the chat box if you want. We don't have any others right now, so I have another one to ask you. The training that your staff get, it's just briefly outlined in the strategy paper. Could you go into a little more detail about what expectations you have of folks coming in to the program, in the TRAC program, and then how do you make sure that they have the skills that they need to work effectively with the youth under your parameters? And just for those who are watching this video, there's something wrong with my webcam and it's zooming in and out. It's not me. So I apologize about that. It's not trying to go for dramatic effect. It's just something strange happening on its own. But if you could just speak to the training, and then when that question is done, it does look like we have another one up on the board there. So, Madeline? Oh, I might need to unmute you, Madeline.
I think we figured it out. Sorry.
Okay, great.
So for us, if anyone is going to be a case manager here at TRAC, they have to have at least a bachelor's degree and at least 2 years of full-time paid working experience with at-risk youth. Mm-hmm. And so that is all documented and proved up in their resume and references. Our onboarding process is for any person that we interview and bring on board, that they have a face-to-face interview with the hiring manager, and then we also have a panel interview with them. So it's not just one person that's seeing if they're a good fit with our community, but also if they're a good fit for the way that we would work with youth. So most of our questions in our interviews tend to be behavior-based and tend to get at the heart of how you engage with a young person. And so we're looking to hire people that have strong empathy, but also have strong boundaries with young people. And so it's that that grace coupled with accountability. Are you able to do that in such a way that a young person still feels loved and wanted, and moving them towards self-sufficiency? And then along the way, once they're hired here, there's some trainings that we make sure everyone understands, which is, because our housing program, we do see a lot of young moms in our housing program, and we're able to house them in our rapid rehousing model. We have a lot of training on reporting child abuse and paying attention to those signs of neglect. We have a lot of training that we do in terms of trauma-informed care and making sure that our staff understand how ACE scores, or adverse childhood experiences, impact the brain, and how when a young person is reacting to you, it's not personal. It has more to do with what they've gone through in their past and how they've learned to react as a survivor. And then we do a lot of a training with all of our staff on William Bridges' transition framework. And so we talk through the transition process and how there's this roadmap and this gray zone, and how most adolescents are in this gray zone all the time, but our adolescents are in there at an even stronger kind of pull towards this transition. And so we do a lot of talk about that. And then because of our housing program, we make sure that our housing coaches particularly know about harm reduction, know about being housing first and why we believe in that. So as an organization, CitySquare really does believe that if we can house you first, then we can help you with the other issues. And if we try and solve all the other issues without your housing being stable, that there's no way that you're going to be able to engage. So we do a lot of training on housing first. And then we also use a lot of motivational interviewing. So really individualized goal setting, going over how do you help a young adult do these individualized goals, how do you make them smart so that they can actually achieve them and make them relevant to them, and how can you motivate them towards their own success plan. So those are most of what we make sure our staff know about.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. All right. It looks like we have another question here. So it looks like it might be Ginny again. Let me go ahead and unmute you. All right. You should be good.
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The question is really a request if there's a mechanism to share the forms that you mentioned, the eviction prevention notice and the housing plan, the template for the housing plan.
Okay. Madeline, do you want to take that one? Madeline? Okay. Can you talk now?
Sure, yeah. So I don't know if you want to allow me the opportunity to show a form, Lynn?
Yeah, sure. If you'd like to, go ahead.
I'd be happy to show some of those forms. And we'd be happy to share whatever. A lot of these were based on other programs. So I haven't received that box yet, Lynn.
Oh, okay. Let me make sure that that's... All right, All right. Let's see if that does it. Did you get that yet?
I did.
All right.
So
it looks like something.
Yep, we see the form.
Okay. Yeah, so this is our housing plan form. So as you can see, it's nothing complicated. It's just very basic. And so one of the things that we find is when a young adult enters our transitional living program, that they don't often, they're just thinking, oh, this is my place to live right now. And I don't know if you guys see this at large, but we see this more big picture with our young adults exiting foster care. Is once they exit, they expect that we're responsible now to find them their next place to live, right? So because that was kind of incentivized to them in foster care, that if I blow this placement, it's somebody else's job to find me a new one, right? But once you turn 18 and are on your own, that's not really the case anymore. So most of what it is we're setting this form, and then we're having a conversation with them that really identifies and goes over every time we see them. Hey, so you're in our transitional living program, and one of the things that maybe you noticed in our strategy paper ours is a little different than most traditional transitional housing programs. While they can stay there for 2 years, that's never our goal. Our goal is to move them out in 6 to 9 months. So from day one, we're talking to them about what's your housing goal. Your housing goal is to get your own apartment. Your housing goal is to get into college and move into a dorm. Your housing goal is to get a roommate and move out. And so we're setting that goal, and every month when we're meeting with them, we're reviewing that housing goal and making sure that they know that they're moving forward and what steps do they need to move towards that process. So sometimes it's getting an ID, sometimes it's getting a job and saving money, sometimes it's locating the apartment or making sure that they graduate from high school and get into college. And so this is, while it seems simple, the part that really focuses it is the conversation that it makes our staff have with the young person regularly.
And I think to emphasize, especially if they're in transitional, that their housing is at will at all times. And so we constantly want to make sure that they understand, so what's your next avenue? What's your next housing plan? So just keeping that conversation going, kind of like Madeline said.
Making sure that they understand that this transitional housing program is temporary housing, that this is not your landing place, this is not your end zone. Or if you're in rapid rehousing, how are you going to be able to take over 30% of your rent in 2 months? And how are you going to be able to take over 50% in 6 months? And how are you going to be able to take over 100% in 9 months? And forecasting that out for them when they have difficulty really grasping that that's going to be here faster than they think, and how much money that's going to require them to have on hand at that time. And then this housing counseling and eviction form is really talking about lease violations and how what they're doing leads to a potential lease violation, and how that really would work with a landlord if they were one-on-one in their own apartment instead of under our supervision. And so we talk about cleanliness, we talk about breaking down a window because they lost their key. We talk about, grilling on a patio. We talk about excessive guests. So because we use apartment complexes, all of our neighbors know us and our neighbors tend to be very vocal about reporting to the managers of that apartment complex when our young adults are throwing a party after hours or doing something else, because we don't have on-site resident advisors that live with them. They live on their own in the community. So it's important for us that they understand that their actions really do lead to lease violations and really do lead to being asked to leave your housing, and that just because you're in our housing program, the same thing would happen if you were in your own apartment as well. So anything housing a landlord would put on your door, like, hey, you violated this, is the same thing that we're coaching them on.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have a follow-up question, and I'm hearing an echo. Okay, there it is, gone. With the housing, you work with landlords, but you also have housing that you manage. Is that correct? On your own properties? And if you do, how does that work? Because there might be some people interested in maybe building housing or starting a program or expanding a program with housing that they manage. So how is that housing managed, overseen, maintained? Are you teaching these young people, here's how you unclog a drain? This is what you do to troubleshoot a problem with the plumbing. What kind of stuff is happening along those lines as well? So that might be two different questions.
No, those are good questions. And so
could you put your video back on? Sorry.
Oh, it's
All right, you might need to talk. I'm not sure. Okay.
So just to clarify, all of our housing here at TRAC is in apartments that other landlords own. So we don't own anything, and we don't operate it. We don't operate in a dorm setting or in a house. We don't rent a house. And we used to have all of our housing located in one complex, and so we would only work with one landlord, which streamlined things, but it also put all of our youth in a fishbowl. And so anything that happened in that complex was immediately TRAC's fault. And so we kind of were thinking, oh, we need to get away from this, and then our housing market here in Dallas exploded. And so then we weren't able to get the number of units that we needed at one complex anyway. And so right now we work with probably about 15 different landlords across our main housing program and have at most 3 units. Maybe in one location we have up to 5 units in one complex. And that's a landlord we've worked with for a long time who has a lot of understanding for the issues our young adults would have. But we're teaching them really to go through the same process any resident would in reporting maintenance requests and working with the landlord on being sure that you're there when the maintenance man comes by and making sure that if your sink does get clogged, you don't just live with it, you solve the problem so that it doesn't get worse. Those kind of things that we do.
Okay, great.
I don't know, Ed, do you want to talk at all about the design of City Walk at Ackerd and how that integrates lots of different communities together?
Okay, Ed, if you put *6 in, I will be able to unmute you.
You may have lost video and audio too, like I did.
Yeah. If you type in *6, I could unmute you. Here, let me try it this way. No, it doesn't seem to be working. Oh, not sure what's happening there. Ed's volume for me is grayed out, so I'm not able to unmute him.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry about that.
Just has, no, it's okay. We have, CitySquare does have CitySquare housing, and so we do buy property and renovate it and create our own apartment communities. And so City Walk at Ackerd is in downtown Dallas and is a large apartment complex that is really set for affordable housing. And so that was all mostly negotiated with the city through tax credits and various other types of ways that they built that property. So we do have youth that live there because they tend to be friendly to the issues. So if we have a young person that's been evicted 3 times, we might move them over there just to make sure that they're given another opportunity with a landlord that understands their ideas.
Okay. All right. Again, if you have any questions, please let us know through *6. I have a question from Sherry here through the chat. Do you have any challenges with insuring your projects? They have a rental house with youth living in it, and it's a struggle to get affordable general liability coverage. So what's your experience with that?
Yeah, so mostly we do not get rental insurance separately. We use our insurance provider for our entire agency, so they've agreed to cover our properties that we rent. So our certificate of insurance that we have for CitySquare covers our landlord. So we are just able to add them on as an additional covered property and provide that COI to the landlord when we rent the unit. So that's kind of how we negotiate that. We did the same thing. We had one landlord who, it was going to be a pretty interesting community that we thought about moving into, but they wanted us to have renter's insurance that was separate from our COI, and we honestly couldn't find an insurance provider that would give it to us as an entity without charging us an arm and a leg. So we actually moved on from that housing option and found a different landlord to work with. But we've had the same experience.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have a question about tracking success. So in the strategy paper, it was explained that you have a follow-up 3 months after your young people exit the program to see how things are going. Have you ever done any follow-up beyond that to see if there's been any long-term success or what the long-term success has been for the youth that have participated in your program? So I was just curious if you've gone beyond the 3 months. But also if you could speak to how things are looking with that 3-month window, how your young people are doing.
Yeah, so it just depends because we have this layered programming outside of our housing program. It depends on how old they were when they came in. And so if they were between the ages of 18 and 21 and they exit our housing program at 19, they're likely to continue to get aftercare case management until they're 21. And so we do continue to track their housing goals for that period of time. And if they hit a snafu, then we might be able to step in with some temporary rental assistance. But for our young adults that are older or who exit and move out of our region, we have, I would imagine, the same issues that a lot of our nationwide partners also have in really young people come in and out of our programming pretty frequently. And so they fly in when they need something and they fly out. And so it's very hard to do those longitudinal studies. And so we've tried, but we have not found much success in being able to incentivize them to stay in touch with us unless they were enrolled in another program where we were already tracking them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the general 3-month results, how are the results for your program in general for TRAC after 3 months?
That's good. Yeah, so on average, the majority of our young people exit to permanent housing and are able to stay in that housing for those 3 months. So I think the last time I ran that report was 6 months ago. We're still working on our 2018 numbers. It was around 87% had left and exited to permanence and maintained that for 3 months after receiving assistance. And so we feel pretty good about that number. And we see about, I think last year we saw 172 young people in our housing program. And so that's a good chunk that are able to maintain permanency once they leave.
Great. Wonderful. The other thing that I wanted to ask you is, I think in the paper, the information that was in there about continual improvement might not have been the right information. So I've replaced the paper in the member section where we have our AOI library. I've replaced the paper with the accurate information. So just so folks understand and get the right information, could you please share how you go about kind of checking in periodically to see where the opportunities for improvement are? And maybe a couple of examples of things that you've done over the past few years to make improvements to the program based on the things you've found out.
Yeah, so because we're HUD funded, we do an APR, an annual performance report based on HUD guidelines. And so every year we look at those numbers and we figure out what happened this year, why something changed either and got greater, or lesser than the year before and figure out why did that happen. Was that because we had an issue with a landlord? Was that because we started participating in coordinated entry? What happened? And then we also track quarterly. So we have a database that we use internally through Social Solutions called Efforts to Outcomes. And so we track quarterly an income assessment for every young person. So we're tracking their income once a quarter. We track their education and employment. So are they still in school? Are they still working? Or did that employment or education change? And we also track their housing. So where are they at in their housing? Are they in stable housing? Have they been in this housing for 6 months? Did they get evicted? Or are they homeless? That sort of thing. And so quarterly I'm running those reports to see where do we stand with our young people and what's happening in those cases. And so we're able to drill that down and to see which ones are really struggling and to talk to their case managers and their coaches to find out what's the backstory on this. Did this young person have a mental health break? Was there domestic violence? Whatever that backstory might be. And then I meet with our housing team also quarterly to kind of go over what are your financial needs and your budget needs to meet the needs of the young people that are in the program, and is there something that needs to shift or change? And then I do a focus group, so we do a weekly community coffee within a young person that wants to come, and so every 3 months I meet with that community coffee group and just listen to what they have to say and pay attention to their feedback about the program and the design. At any given time, a young person can file a grievance if they feel that they were wrongly given a lease violation or wrongly asked to exit the program, or they just have a disagreement with their coach today, they can file that grievance, and so they get an audience with Carla or myself if that happens. And so we're able to investigate those issues and find out, does that particular staff member need some coaching? Does that particular staff member need some training to remember trauma-informed care? Whatever that might be. And so those are some of the ways we do continual improvement. CitySquare has an outcomes team, and so they're tracking my track outcomes against other CitySquare programs, and so I'm graded internally to see, hey, what's happening, and then I sit on a directors roundtable with different internal housing providers to find out, hey, what are you guys doing? How are you making sure that your people aren't getting evicted as often as mine are? What's happening here? Do you have a landlord that I could potentially talk to? Carla also goes to a monthly youth task force meeting with the other youth providers, and so she can talk a little bit about how that collaborative helps us improve our program too.
Yeah, it's kind of what we talked about in the beginning of knowing the players that offer housing in the community. So I think that if you don't have a youth committee or a youth task force under the COC umbrella, I think I would really encourage all providers to do that, to get that synergy to where that one small voice becomes a bigger voice when it comes to COC and looking at housing opportunities, increasing those housing opportunities. HUD is, I think, just announced that they're looking to do the 4th HUD demonstration grant. That's going to be vital to our COC, is to have that youth community or youth task force, but also have the youth action board. So we're working on getting our voice for our young people heard at a higher level. So.
Yeah, so to piggyback off of that, just to clarify, the COC can have a youth task force, and so there's only 3 COC-funded youth housing programs in the Dallas continuum, but we have close to 30 members, and so those are privately funded entities that are RHY funded, the local school district, anybody that touches homeless youth is invited to that collaborative. So that's one of the ways that you can increase that voice. And so if you are privately funded or you're funded through RHY, to know that your voice matters in the continuum and to join and to make sure that they understand how homeless youth are impacted.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I see that it's just a couple of minutes before 2 o'clock, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank Madeline and Carla and Ed for joining us today and sharing the information, the more details about their program than was in the strategy paper. Really, really do appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who joined us as an attendee. Really appreciate that as well. And let's see, I want to remind everybody, all the members of Aging Out Institute, that we have our discussions in the AOI discussions page of our website, the membership portion of the website. So we're discussing housing this month. And so if you could go in and put in your 2 cents, your perspective of what young people need to know and be able to do in order to be successful gaining and maintaining stable housing as they transition from foster care into adulthood, that would be greatly appreciated. Trying to get as many ideas and thoughts and perspectives as we can from all the different organizations that are out there. Our next webinar is scheduled for April 18th, and that's going to be at 1 o'clock again Eastern Time. This is going to be Roots and Wings. This is the program that won the Holistic Services Award last year, and essentially what that award is highlighting an organization that has submitted strong, effective strategies in all of the award categories, which is education, employment, housing, and relationships. So Roots and Wings, which is based in New Jersey, will be answering questions about their program on April 18th. For those members who are in attendance, if you go into the webinar list in the member website, you can register now and go ahead and get that in your calendar. So I think that's it. Madeline, Carla, Ed, do you want to have any final thoughts before we close up today?
Well, we'd love to learn more about all of you as well and what you do. The strength of our program is really based on what we learn from our young people and participants. So feel free to look us up, CitySquare/TRAC, and we would be glad to hear from you and to know kind of how we can relate and partner together. And Lynn, I'll talk to you about if there's any forms that we could upload or share with the community. We'd be happy to do that too. So.
I believe that in the discussion forum you can upload documents. So if you went in the discussions on housing, ideal, you could go ahead and share any forms that you feel free or feel willing to share. So that would be greatly appreciated by everyone, I'm sure.
Okay, great.
All
we'll
right.
figure out how to do this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much. It's 2:01, because a little past 2. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.